Good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here today. And I know we're just starting up. It's still early morning, at least for me. I'm still waking up in my head. But thank you for being here. I think I'm going to really start probably by inviting our speakers to the stage here. If I could invite Commissioner Melissa Hishmuddin. She's the Commissioner of SUHACAM, the National Human Rights Commission of Malaysia. She's with us today, and she's really played an instrumental role in shaping the business and human rights agenda in Malaysia. Come on in. I think you can take one of those seats. Can we have a round of applause for Commissioner Melissa? Next up, we have a youth enthusiast, Mohammad Agung Saharuddin. He's coming. A youth leader from University of Indonesia who would actually bring and help us bring perspectives really from the ground. Can you please take the seat here? Thank you for joining us. And last but not the least, we have with us Esteran. She's the Chief Sustainability Officer at City Development Limited, which is one of the leading voices globally on embedding sustainability into business practice. All right, thank you all for being here. All right, morning again. It is actually a real pleasure to be moderating this discussion today and to open, which I believe is a very important but also very critical and timely conversation. We've already heard from our distinguished speakers in the opening segment where the world is heading. Thanks, Ed, for sharing those numbers, but also where Asia is heading and the scale of transformation that we are underway across climate, across industry, but also across policy. And actually, when I was listening to both of you, and Dr. Ince, I was just also thinking about the same time when I started working on business and human rights, and Esther and we were sort of speaking today, when we kind of started working in this space, a lot of people often ask, business and human rights? Like, what's even the connections? It does feel like we have come a long way from there. But I was also thinking about all the numbers that were being shared or the conversation that we are hearing. It isn't a conversation for future. I mean, many of the businesses here in the room are actually experiencing and living what's happening and where those numbers are impacting. And in some ways, we see that across Asia so clearly. 1 week, it's extreme weather conditions that hitting production. The next, it's supply chain probably getting even more fragile, or a project that shows down because something on the ground just wasn't picked up early enough. And we aren't just anymore talking about a bad storm season anymore. I think we're talking about, what we're talking here about is also the triple planetary crisis: climate, biodiversity loss, and pollution, hitting the balance sheet of every major supplier here in Southeast Asia, but I guess also globally. At the same time, the policy space is shifting. We heard earlier about the national action plans, but just kind of, more broadly, with the adoption of the CSDDD, as we call it, the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, it's going to change how things are done in the region, but also the ASEAN Declaration on Right to Healthy and Sustainable Environment. And the conversation, particularly with the declaration, kind of came to the region because it's no more just a global agenda. It is actually expectation from the region, and we're pretty much saying this is how we do businesses here. So what we're really talking about today, and Ed gave us lots and lots of numbers, is about risk. And how early are we able to see it? Because many of us actually know this already. The first sign of risk do not ever come from some spreadsheets or reports in the headquarters. I mean, ask a farmer, how's the crop, how's the production? And you see that these risks are actually, they show up on the ground, impacts on people, impact on communities, and ecosystems are often the earlier signs of business risk. They show up in many different ways. And we've seen that if those signals are not picked up early, they can actually become very real risk, and from social also to sort of reputational damaging and much harder to solve. So, And I guess one of the things is, when we start looking at the risk, and anybody who is who has looked at the risk in a certain way, one thing becomes very, very clear that no one actor actually really holds the picture. Companies see operations, governments see policy, and communities actually see impact. So I guess if the risk that with the way that we're looking at, and if the risks are interconnected, I think the response cannot be siloed. You can't really build resilient supply chains without the people in them, the workers, the communities, but also the next generation who are shaping how these systems evolve. So I think I'm very pleased to have this panel here today to talk about actually the title of the conference and the opening here, De-risking Asia's transition, the regulatory expectations and rights-based resilience. So probably I'll start, maybe a little bit in terms of how the landscape is shifting. And Commissioner, I would like to start probably with you because, under Malaysia's leadership, chairmanship last year, ASEAN adopted the Declaration on Right to Clean, Healthy, and Sustainable Environment. Now, from Suhakam's perspective, but just also more broadly, from the experiences now that you have had over the last couple of months in implementation, how do you see this shaping expectations for businesses in Southeast Asia? I think particularly when it comes to due diligence, stakeholder engagement, and access to remedy. You will have about 4 to 5 minutes, probably. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Haprit. Thank you, esteemed guests. For Suhakam, or the National Human Rights Commission, thank you for bringing up the successes, I would say, that we have had together with UNDP since last year. But before that, if I could structure the 4 minutes within grounding the global, or from local initiatives to regional to global human rights standards. So nationally, I will start with all that we've covered this morning. For example, your presentation just now is linked to right to life under Article 5 in the Malaysian Federal Constitution. So as chair of the Law and Policy Group, I have to start with that. But right to life is embedded within all the aspects of these colorful boxes you see within the Sustainable Development Goals, targets and indicators. And bringing back to what you said, Malaysia's leadership, within last year we were very proud, but not just individually, but together with all our Southeast Asia siblings, shall we say, where we developed the declaration. And one important point within the declaration is the word safe in the ASEAN Declaration on Healthy Environments. So within there, when we do declarations within ASEAN, one critique or gap that has always been set is how do we follow through nationally. So we are also proud to announce we have also had the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights nationally. However, again, not forgetting that issues of climate and environment now and all the shifting geopolitics that we have now, so we need to look at our region, and as mentioned, some of the most polluted cities is in Asia Pacific. So first we look at Southeast Asia, and we're also very proud to announce that following through, as of next month, Malaysia, Suhakam, will be the chair for the association of all the National Human Rights Commissions that are members in Southeast Asia. So we will be the host again. So not just last year, again with National Human Rights Commissions. So tying it back to business and human rights is where within the hosting capabilities next month is where we will have sessions to do with business and human rights, to do with indigenous rights. And that is where, again, I would like to call your attention to these colorful boxes in front of us, because the Sustainable Development Goals are things that are entrenched and incidentally matches the timeline of the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights. So how do we listen regarding de-risking any impact to particularly balancing development with that of the rights holders' impacts on communities? So just now, we mentioned on right to water. We heard about right to water, right to land, the effect of plastics, and nowhere else is it most relevant other than us looking at, for example, the intersectionality of business and human rights. So number one, I mentioned just now indigenous rights, but within indigenous rights, did we look at right to land in a cooperative manner with the government? So despite all the fears we have now, the uncertainties we have now, I really would like to credit that some collaborations, some adaptations to the uncertainties are moving well. So I would like to credit, for example, UNDP, working together very closely with SOHACAM, and also with NRES within government structures. So we have had intersectionality between indigenous rights and gender, for example. So now I'm pulling from an international standard. So globally, we had COP in Brazil. So there's a BELEM gender action plan that is already weaved in within the national business and human rights action plans. And we are following on with centering the indigenous voices. So for example, indigenous women. Just now we also heard about children, the impact on children. So Malaysia, for example, was just reviewed in January before the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And there's a specific general comment, the general comment on children and climate and the impact of the environment and what you said. What is the effective remedy for children if they're impacted through rivers, through the use of their land? Again, right to life, what I said in the beginning, ties very much to their overall rights for indigenous communities. But because the core issue is de-risking and also supply chains, I would also like to give a glimmer of hope where the best knowledge ever on how do you manage natural resources, especially in countries with a lot of the tropical rainforests, is from the indigenous communities. So what about self-determination? What about honoring that culture and knowledge towards development together with the corporate sector? So these are some of the things that we are exploring. When I say we, Suhakam, for example, will be holding another forum with the Sabah government in East Malaysia. And we know we have bordering countries that also are hosting or chairing ASEAN, which is the Philippines, for example, bordering with Sabah. So when I say things that are local, are being, let's say, diversified together with regional approaches and within the two ASEAN declarations. And in the end, we also tie it to all the targets and indicators of the Sustainable Development Goals because both end in 2030 and we're already in 2026. Yeah. So within all those standards and within the support that we have had with the government, it's incredibly positive. I am very, very impressed with how SDG 5 on gender indicators have been shown very clearly in the planning together with NRES, for example, in Malaysia. Also, within Southeast Asia, there's a cross-regional approach where we are learning from south to south examples. And like what you mentioned, even though we say some of the most polluted cities are in the Asia Pacific, it is also an opportunity for us to move forward on, for example, work on human rights cities. And when we say human rights cities, we don't just mean the pollution is only happening in the oceans, it's also in urban areas and the risks that are, and the risks that exist within the supply chains, also in the proximity of the communities impacted. So to tie up, I'm told my time is running out, but if I can add to the end, is when we remember these timelines, when we are able to ground these grand words within our specific actions, specific work plans, and specific targets, and where all parties have consistently come together, I think we are able to move forward together in managing all the uncertainties, all the scary situations that's happening right now in terms of the supply, in terms of the communities impacted, and most importantly, the rights holders. So maybe I'll end with that first, and thank you so much, Dr. April.
Sure, no, thank you. And I think what I'm hearing, there's so much to unpack just in what you said, but I think largely what I'm hearing is that, it is really important for businesses in the room is really that there are no like these future regulation. It's not that conversation. The landscape is shifting already, and it's probably in some ways moving much faster than policy, but also just in terms of how it is becoming even more critical to center rights holders and affected communities and the most marginalized ones at the center of all our efforts. And I like how you started with hope and, to sort of look at also just in terms of the positives that are taking place here in Asia, because I feel like when I open newspaper, I still read a physical newspaper, old school, but it feels like, when you, like these days, it's just like, it's so difficult somewhere to get hope with the geopolitics and, what's happening globally. But to see these developments in Asia, I think is really, really, what we see here is an opportunity also to how can we really, really demonstrate ASEAN's leadership as well. And I think, again, one of the key reasons probably that gives us hope is here the youth in Asia. And we are seeing youth movements globally, but just also kind of, very, very concretely here in Asia, where they're engaged with climate litigation, with biodiversity advocacy, or just human rights campaigns in general. I think we've seen some success stories from there. And Agunga, if I could bring you in there, and to kind of, we've heard from Commissioner Melissa in terms of how the policy landscape is shifting, what governments are doing, what national human rights commissions are looking at. But if you could bring in, what does it really mean for the communities on the ground, but also how do you think young people are able to influence Asia in the context of corporate accountability? And if you could share probably some examples from your own experience and your work would be very helpful. We're running already behind, so I'm going to have to stop sharp at 4 minutes. So if you could please just probably try to keep it within that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Harvard, for the very interesting question. And thank you very much for this opportunity, because I want to disclaimer that this is my first time talk about the community grassroots movement in international level, because in my experience, I just share our movement, our grassroots movement in the local, like in the village, and also in the regional level. And this is a very great opportunity to us as a youth to share our experiences in grassroots level. First, I would say that if you look the current developments, the answer is absolutely yes. Youth in Asia, including Indonesia, are actively shaping new expectation of a corporate accountability, particularly on issue of climate, biodiversity, and human rights. That's interesting. However, is that this influence does not always come from a formal space. Instead, it emerges from combination of grassroots level, digital advocacy, and social innovation. In Indonesia, for example, we see how grassroots movement like Fridays Future for Indonesia are actively advocates about the climate exchange across various cities. But they are not only voicing concern about the climate action, but also they concerning about I'm sorry. Yeah. They are not only voicing concern about the climate crisis, but they explicitly demanding emission transparency and corporate responsibility from energy companies in ensuring a just transition. And on the other hand, young people also working through more structured advocate channel. They working closely with the organization like Wahana Lingkungan Indonesia, or we call WALHI, who actively campaigns and campaigns about the sustainable environmental and also WALHI have a very fundamental support to our government and industry as a representative of community level to make best policy to our environment, and also to as how to say as yes, as a collaboration partner with the corporate actors in Indonesia. And I think it is one of the best experiences that we have in Indonesia that we want to share in this forum. And then if we talk about the involved in campaigns and legislation against companies engaged in deforestation and dispossession of indigenous communities, this is crucial because as biodiversity issue in Asia cannot be separate in human rights concern. And in addition, there are more adaptive approach emerging to digital space. In Indonesia, we know about the communities like Extinction Rebellion Indonesia, which actively use social media to expose greenwashing practice. They are reshaping how we understand corporate reputation, showing that today business legitimacy is determined is not only by profit but also by increasingly critical public perception. And importantly, young people are not only applying pressure, they are also creating alternative. In Indonesian perspective, and maybe also in Asia, many youth-led initiatives are developing solutions in the circular economy, renewable energy, and green entrepreneurship. And this sends a strong message that corporate accountability is not only a regulation, but also a future relevance. Of course, there are a significant challenge. First, there is a power imbalance, like as corporations have a far greater resources than youth movement. And second, in some Asian contexts, including Indonesia, we still see restriction on civic space or the discrimination of our activists in the society. And I think I want to underline these very crucial cases because recently in Indonesia especially there is some cases that intimidating to our environmental and human rights activists. And I think we need to collaborate to change our perceptions that grassroots movement is not the rival of the corporate, but it's our way to critique or to building critique to the government and and corporate to be better in the policy and decision. Okay. Uh, Nevertheless, I see strong opportunity in Asian and Indonesian context. We have demographic dividends, meaning that young people not only as advocates but also as voters, as consumer, and also as innovators. And with the support of global connection like this and digital technology, youth voice can be transcends national borders and directly pressure corporate actors at the national and global level. I think that's all. Thank you.
Sure, no, thank you, Agong. And again, I think you raised some really important questions, but also the challenges, especially the civil society facing, in Asia, but I guess just also more broadly, and just in terms of the way that we look at power imbalance, the shrinking civic space in the region. Unfortunately, we won't have the time to discuss in this opening plenary, but I hope in the next 2 days, these are important issues, and thank you for raising those, and I hope, for the next 2 days, we are able to bring that in. But what I'm also hearing from both of you very, very clearly is the way that the climate and, all the conversations on environmental have such a close connection with human rights and governance, right? And I think, Esther, I'm going to bring you in here because, honestly, from a business perspective, this shift could be very, very overwhelming, right? Because also, you're talking about businesses here in Asia, largely small and medium enterprises, very, very fragmented policy regulatory landscape, at least as of now. So it could be very overwhelming for businesses. And you've been working, we were discussing this morning how you've been working with your businesses and with your own experience, for a number of years to look at this. So if you could probably, maybe share a little bit in terms of what steps do you think companies are taking to move beyond this conversation and actually being able to embed human rights and environmental due diligence in core business strategy. And if you could probably share one or two very concrete examples, I think would really help us bring the conversation relevance to the room as well. Over to you. Belinda, what time are we ending the session? I'm sorry, because I know we started late, so I just want to make sure that we... Okay, I have 8 minutes is all I have? All right. So you have 3 minutes, probably.
Oh my God.
Yes, or maybe we will give you 4 minutes and then we'll come back to rest of the panel here.
Okay, good morning. Well, I have to speak really, really fast. I think
yeah, you're speaking with loud now.
Yeah.
I have been trying to speak very slow and not using my Indian speed. And you're just bringing that into the play right now. So thank you.
I would say that businesses is at the core, interfacing with regulator, global, civil society, and people and the community. And just a quick context that I'm from working for City Developments Limited, or CDL, which actually is in the built environment for 63 years now. And we operate in 29 countries and regions. We build home and we build work, commercial office and shopping mall and hotels and all globally. And we know that our sector has very high environmental impact, accounting for almost close to 40% of greenhouse gas emissions globally, and also consume about 50% of natural resources. What you build, infrastructure, the steel, the sand, the stones, and everything, it is actually from nature. And we started a sustainability journey 30 years ago, 1995, and with the ethos of conserving as we construct. At that time, very simple, life was simpler and not as complex like today. But fast track to today, climate action, adaptation, risk are all at the core of our businesses. But now we are not just talking about sustainability of is doing good. Actually, is competitiveness. And just now we talk about EU. I mean, a lot of Asian supplier exports to Asia, Europe. Look at CBAM. Look at EURDR, which is the deforestation regulations. And they look at the whole, supply chain and whether you create any impact on deforestation, and also looking at your carbon footprint. If you want a pie of the business, you have to really adhere to all these compliance regulations and all. And in fact, just now we heard all the data are very scary, but I want to highlight one specific one. This is very close to home. We are next to the equator. The whole ASEAN region's heat is the #1 silent killer in the world, taking away one life every minute as we talk. So heat to us in Singapore is actually a survival, issue, not just a doing good issue, because Singapore is island state, and we are subject to urban heat island effect, and our warming is like double as fast as global average. If we don't look at heat seriously, we will not survive. So heat also linked to rising sea level and a lot of other issues. So risk mitigation is a must, not just for businesses, but for the community, for the environment, for planet. I'm a big fan of the triple bottom line that Belinda mentioned. Without a healthy planet, nobody, no organization will be able to thrive, and don't talk about profits. But if businesses cannot come up with a solution, integrate sustainability to add value to business, you cannot survive either. And the first group of people who suffer is your staff, if you need to retrench. So maintaining financial viability is very important. It's an obligation for businesses. So how do we do it and integrate ESG effectively to create business case, and also not just about mitigation, but also about adaptation, innovation, very important. Not just looking at renewable energy, technology, and all, but also turn to nature. Nature-based solution is one of our biggest priority now. And in Singapore, we are known to be, clean and green, but not enough. 40% green cover doesn't mean that it can cool our urban spaces where we work, where the city center. So in fact, it came up with solution. If I can just put one example, to deal with heat, we need to look at, even you plant a million tree in a suburb, it doesn't help me to cool my building in the city center. And so what we launched is 1 year ago, we launched a microforest, bring forest to my development. And after 1 year, we just released the data 1 week ago, and it really proved that it helped to reduce temperature very significantly and also enhance biodiversity. Loss of nature is going to erode 44% of global GDP. And 50% of global GDP are relying on nature and its services, F&B, agriculture, fishing, and where our industry is. So we definitely have to look at, nature for solutions rather than just, conserving it is not good enough. We have to look at restoring it and regenerating it. Just now, we talk about, waste. And in fact, today is the International Day for Zero Waste. Yeah, so waste is very important because food waste and normal waste contribute to about 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So all these climate threats are all interrelated. And in fact, microplastic, and you are very right. Actually, I have the fortunes to visit both Arctic and Antarctic climate expedition. We did research, we collect water sample and air sample. We even found microplastic in the air. So you can choose not to eat fish, but you can't choose not to breathe. So I think it is something that, it is human rights because, we have the rights to breathe at least fresh air and plastic-free air and water as well. So one last thing is actually heat also cause rising sea level. And out of the top 10 sinking cities, 3 are in our region. So we definitely have to look at sustainability and climate threats as a human rights.
And I think, thanks, Esther. And I think this is all really important because if we're kind of talking about expanding our supply chains, if you're trying to sort of bring in more investment and making Asia investment proof, I think it's really important we start looking at how are we de-risking our supply chains and really catching on these risks early. Heat is something that gets talked about probably in every conversation right now, but I think also where are we looking at solutions? On nature-based, I know that there is a nature-based, there's a training that's happening for the businesses on nature-based solutions tomorrow afternoon. I think Belinda will share at some point the agenda again, but we've been working very closely with businesses to develop a training module, also to sort of look at what do businesses need to do when they start looking at nature-based solutions. So please join us for the training as well. I know we're running behind time, so I do have to start wrapping up. But probably, maybe if I could just come, we're going to skip a lot of our conversations that were supposed to happen, but I hope we're able to cover that over the next 2 days. But, what do you think is probably the single most critical step that's needed to build an environment resilient in Asia? Probably, Esther, if we can start with you and then, just move here.
Okay.
So you want to go ahead first?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, with you.
No, it's okay. Go ahead first.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah, just very quickly, just remember the ABCD, okay? A is about alignment with global goals, regional goals, and your industry goals. Not just talking, but to really find solution. Alignment is very important, and internally with your stakeholder and with your supply chain. B is about making it business case. Whether you're a big conglomerate or SME, if you don't integrate sustainability to create business value, it will not be sustained, whatever efforts that you need to do. And then C is about collaboration. You can't do it alone. We have to collaborate with, policymaker, civil society, and our supply chain, and especially youth. ASEAN, more than 50% of our population are below 30 years old. They are the driving force, and they can be also very demanding of the future, which they have the right to do that. So how do we work together, collaborate with the younger generation is very important. D is about disclosure. whatever we do, whether you take action or inaction, disclosure is very important. Even you don't want to do it, regulator will ask for it, investor, bankers, everybody will ask for it. So data is king, and sustainable finance is a key driver. But if you don't show them data, it will not be easy to lend you money. So these are the ABCD that about business, integration of sustainability.
Excellent. I think just very quickly, 2 points on that. On the business case, actually UNDP conducted a study and we looked at empirical data from businesses and we used the CHRB, the Corporate Human Rights Benchmark methodology. And actually we got statistically significant results that if businesses invest in human rights-based approaches and environmental safe solutions, they do not actually build a loss. And I think that the way that they're looking at it is there's a positive correlation, which is statistically significant that establishes between when businesses take on human rights principles and practice in place. On disclosures, we do actually have at 11 o'clock an interesting session on are disclosures enough? So we're hopeful to take that conversation forward in there as well. Agung, if I could come to you probably. For the same question, what do you think is probably the single most critical step that's needed to build an environmental resilient Asia? And you have like 30 seconds.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I want to underline about the collaboration each other and also collaboration is not also youth by youth, but also collaboration with the corporation. Because in Indonesian, we also have a challenges to how to make a safe for our activists in environmental human rights. And I think government and corporation have a very fundamental rule to guarantee the safe of our activists in the society. And as a practitioner in grassroots movement, we also always want to collaborate with the company, but maybe in some cases there is barriers because maybe there is we say oknum who always intimidate us, but in this era we have a very powerful platform like digital advocacy. Especially in Asia, we know about the quote, the power of netizen. So the power of netizen, especially in ASEAN, right? It very powerful platform to voicing our concern in human rights and environmental issue.
Sure, thank
That's
you.
all.
Commissioner, you
Thank
have the final word.
Short sentences. Okay. So just now I said grounding the global, but the key takeaway also is to have the due diligence happen in substance, in structure, and in culture. So in substance, for example, SDG 13 on climate action, is it written into all our laws and policy? If yes, then number 2, do we have the structures that implement it? So the structure with innovation, with the industry, with, for example, in Malaysia, in Parliament, we monitor already the actions of the business sector, but we listen to the business sector together with the communities like the indigenous. And lastly, culture. So a culture of no longer business as usual, no longer profit margin based, but again, innovation, where we work together towards building human rights cities or human rights areas of the environment. As what you said, no one is an island. We all have to work together. So I finish with that. Thank you so much.
No. So I think I take away that collaboration is the key. And we've got a lot of acronyms here, the ABCD, SSC. And we do hope to unpack those over the next 2 days. But thank you very much for joining the panel today and for this excellent conversation. I think it was a rich discussion. I wish we had more time.